Christmas at Sandringham was supposed to project unity, tradition, and royal forgiveness. Instead, one deliberate announcement shattered the illusion before the family had even gathered. Princess Anne did not merely alter a seating plan or withdraw a private invitation. She publicly confirmed that Meghan had been removed from the royal family Christmas gathering entirely. And when the decision reached California, the Duchess reportedly stared at the message in stunned silence, realizing this was not a temporary slight, but a formal line drawn in front of the world. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne knew the announcement would carry more weight than any private refusal. Sandringham Christmas was not simply a holiday meal. It was the sovereign's family gathering, a public sign of who stood inside the monarch's trusted circle. Attendance shaped the church walk, family luncheon, photographs, and official record. Removing one name meant removing a person from the image of royal unity. At the palace briefing, Anne moved without hesitation. She slid Meghan's place card away from the approved layout, turned it face down, and ordered staff to remove the Duchess from the invitation schedule, church procession, luncheon, gift exchange, and commemorative Christmas archive. The archive was the official record documenting participation in major royal occasions. A senior courtier repeated the instruction in a documented briefing note, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Meghan opened the communication in California and assumed an aide had made an error. Then she saw Anne's name attached to the final instruction. Her disbelief hardened into humiliation. This was not a missing seat. It was a declaration that the family intended to celebrate without her and preserve that absence as part of the official story. Harry read the notice over her shoulder and felt anger rise. Yet when Meghan demanded that he call his aunt immediately, he hesitated. She noticed. He wanted to defend his wife, but he understood that Anne rarely acted without months of thought. That pause cut deeper than the notice, because it revealed that even Harry feared there was more behind the decision. Meghan began drafting a response, but before she finished, Harry received a recorded message from a palace intermediary, confirming that Anne had waited for months. One specific incident had convinced her that Christmas could no longer be used as a stage for reconciliation. The announcement wounded Meghan in public, but the deeper pain came from discovering that Anne's decision was not emotional, impulsive, or temporary. It had been built around the people closest to the crown and the loyalties they were now being forced to choose. Behind the palace language were two women who had come to represent opposite ideas of royal duty. Meghan believed that distance had given her the freedom to define her own place within the family. Anne believed that membership demanded discipline even when the cameras disappeared. Now those beliefs had collided over the most emotionally charged royal tradition of the year. What looked like an invitation dispute was, in reality, a battle over who had the right to call themselves part of the family. Anne carried Christmas as a responsibility, not a celebration. She treated the Sandringham gathering as a duty inherited from Queen Elizabeth, whose customs had shaped the family for decades. The procession order, arrangements for elderly relatives, children's schedules, and private family traditions all passed through her careful review. For the princess, preserving those details meant protecting continuity when the monarchy itself felt increasingly fragile. Meghan saw the same gathering through a different wound. To her, Christmas attendance was proof that she, Harry, Archie, and Lilibet had not been erased. Their marriage, their children, and their shared history should have guaranteed an enduring place, even after years of conflict. When the palace described the event as family-only arrangements, she circled the words and read them again. The phrase felt colder than rejection. It suggested the family no longer viewed her absence as a dispute, but as a definition. Harry watched her anger harden into humiliation. He remembered Anne defending him during earlier confrontations, often when others had withdrawn. That memory made the present decision harder to condemn. Meghan noticed his silence and asked whether he secretly understood his aunt's reasoning. He denied it, but the pause before his answer exposed the loyalties pulling him apart. William had already reviewed the Christmas plan before Anne made it public. He did not write the instruction. Yet when Meghan's name disappeared, he offered no objection. His silence gave the decision the future king's protection. Charles responded with even less. The king received the revised schedule in his private study, placed it down, removed his glasses, and said nothing. That silence became approval, destroying Meghan's hope that Harry's father might intervene. Catherine understood what none of them had yet said aloud. In a private conversation, she warned William that Meghan would eventually learn why Anne acted. He answered that the truth would hurt more than the exclusion, because it involved a Christmas promise Meghan had made, and then broken. The battle was no longer simply Anne against Meghan. Because Charles had remained silent, William had stepped aside, and Catherine was guarding the memory of a promise whose betrayal had pushed the family past the point of return. Every royal rupture has a moment that later appears inevitable. A sentence spoken too sharply, a confidence repeated outside the room, or a promise broken when trust was already fragile. For Anne, that moment came during the previous winter, behind closed doors, when the family attempted one final private gesture toward reconciliation. Meghan had been given a narrow path back into the Christmas circle. She accepted its conditions. Then, within 48 hours, something meant to remain sacred reached the outside world. Catherine had arranged the private video conversation because she still believed the family could step back from permanent division. Meghan spoke directly to Anne during that call. She promised that anything involving Christmas, the children, or Queen Elizabeth's traditions would remain private. Anne accepted the assurance and agreed to support a limited invitation later, believing discipline could reopen what mistrust had closed. 2 days later, Catherine attended a charity reception in London. A broadcaster approached her and repeated a sentence Meghan had used privately. Christmas should not be controlled by one branch of the family. Catherine felt the meaning immediately. The words had crossed a boundary no one had permission to cross. Anne called Harry that same evening. She asked whether the phrase had come from his home. He denied it, but his pause came first. That hesitation mattered more than the answer. Then the second detail surfaced. The broadcaster also knew Charles had suggested sending personal gifts to Archie and Lilibet, separately from the official exchange. Only 6 people had heard that proposal. Coincidence no longer felt possible. Catherine met Anne after the reception and recounted the exchange in a private recorded statement prepared for the family file. Anne listened, closed the door, and made a quiet vow. No future Christmas would place Catherine under that pressure again. Tradition, she said, could not survive if every private kindness became public negotiation. In the present, Harry finally told Meghan that Anne's decision came from that breach. Her shock turned instantly into anger. The accusation felt brutally final. She insisted she had never given the words to any broadcaster and demanded to face Anne directly. Meghan could endure being excluded, but she would not accept being judged for a betrayal she denied committing, and that determination set her on a collision course with the one royal least likely to soften under pressure. The confrontation did not happen in a ballroom, before cameras, or through carefully drafted palace statements. It happened across a private video call, with no aides present and no one available to soften the words. Meghan entered determined to challenge what she called a public punishment. Anne entered with the stillness of someone who had already reached her verdict. Within minutes, Christmas disappeared from the discussion. What remained was a brutal argument over trust, loyalty, motherhood, and the price of belonging. Harry had persuaded Anne to take the call, because he feared silence would harden the dispute into something permanent. She agreed only after setting 4 conditions: no advisors, no recording, no prepared statement, and no later public account. Meghan accepted, but her brief restraint lasted only moments. She told Anne that removing her from Christmas had humiliated Archie and Lilibet by suggesting their mother stood outside the family. Anne answered without raising her voice. The children, she said, had not been rejected. Their names remained in the private gift register, which was the family's internal record of Christmas presents. But adult membership could not be protected by invoking children whenever accountability became painful. Meghan's anger sharpened. She asked Anne to look directly at her and say she was no longer family. Anne held her gaze. Family, she replied, was not erased, but access to family traditions could be withdrawn when trust repeatedly collapsed. Harry leaned forward and accused his aunt of punishing Meghan more harshly than others. Anne reminded him that she had defended him privately for years, even when doing so cost her influence. His anger, she said, could not erase the consequences of choices made after he left royal duties. Meghan then denied contacting the broadcaster. She suggested someone inside the palace had leaked the conversation to discredit her. For the first time, Anne's certainty shifted. If that possibility were true, the decision rested on incomplete evidence. But the hesitation vanished when she revealed what had followed. The broadcaster possessed wording from a later message, sent only to Meghan and Harry. The exact phrase appeared nowhere else. Anne had received the comparison through a documented account prepared after Catherine's charity reception, making an internal leak far less likely than Meghan wanted to believe. Before the call ended, Meghan asked who had supplied that comparison. Anne answered with one name: Catherine. The woman who had tried to reopen the family door had now provided the evidence used to close it. The call ended without forgiveness. But Meghan was no longer fighting only Anne's decision. She was now facing Catherine's evidence, William's approval, and a family structure that had quietly aligned against her. Anne had delivered the announcement, but she had not acted in isolation. Behind her stood a quiet alliance, formed through private conversations, painful memories, and a shared fear that Christmas was becoming another battlefield. Charles held constitutional authority. William carried the future of the monarchy. Catherine guarded the family's most fragile relationships. Yet it was Anne who accepted the burden of saying what the others would not. The decision belonged to one voice, but the power behind it belonged to several. Charles had delegated practical control of the Sandringham Christmas schedule to Anne after she managed earlier gatherings without public disorder. That authority covered attendance, ceremonial movement, and access to the family's private rooms. It gave her the power to organize the occasion, but not the freedom to ignore its emotional cost. Anne met each of them separately before acting. She asked Charles, William, and Catherine the same question. Would Meghan's presence create reconciliation, or would Christmas become another struggle over narratives, attention, and blame? None answered quickly. Their silence revealed how much trust had already been lost. No one celebrated the agreement. Each understood exactly what it might destroy. Charles struggled most. He sat beside a framed photograph of Harry as a child, and admitted that excluding Meghan could drive his son further away. Yet the king also feared that welcoming her without restored confidence would place every private exchange under suspicion. Anne listened as he chose stability over hope, then watched him fall silent under the weight of that choice. Catherine carried the evidence. She showed Anne the follow-up message containing language later repeated publicly. Her hands tightened around the phone because she understood what sharing it would mean. She had worked hardest to reopen the door, and now her documented account could close it. William made the final alignment unmistakable. He told Anne he would not challenge her decision, but he would not announce it himself. The future king wanted the exclusion understood as a family boundary, not as revenge from a man settling a personal score. Anne signed the completed Christmas schedule and said the consequences would belong to her. By accepting public responsibility, she shielded Charles, William, and Catherine from becoming the faces of Meghan's removal. In California, Meghan learned that the decision had collective support. She opened a blank document and began drafting a statement. Harry watched each sentence appear and realized that publishing it could confirm every fear Anne had used to justify the exclusion. Anne had taken the blame to protect the others, but Meghan's response threatened to expose the entire alliance and transform a private family boundary into a global confrontation before Christmas morning arrived. Once the decision became public, the consequences moved faster than anyone inside the palace expected. In California, Meghan prepared to defend herself before silence could define her. At Sandringham, staff removed her name from schedules that had already been printed. Harry stood between a wounded wife and a family he still wanted his children to know. And Anne, outwardly unmoved, discovered that enforcing a boundary carried its own private cost. The exclusion was complete, but peace remained nowhere in sight. Palace staff began revising everything at once. Meghan's name disappeared from the church procession, luncheon seating, security list, accommodation plan, and family photography schedule. The removal was no longer symbolic. Each alteration erased another practical sign that she had once been fully expected there, turning one decision into a complete withdrawal of access. Harry remained technically welcome with Archie and Lilibet, but the invitation carried a condition. He could attend only if Christmas did not become another negotiation over Meghan's status. That placed him between three identities he could no longer separate: husband, father, and prince. Choosing one seemed to wound the others. Meghan finished a statement accusing the palace of selective punishment. Her hand hovered over publish as Harry asked her to stop. He warned that public retaliation would not restore her place. It would close the remaining door for their children. She turned on him. Was he asking for silence because he believed Anne, or because he still feared confronting his family? Harry felt the accusation land, but he did not retreat. Protecting their dignity, he said, could not mean repeating the same cycle that had brought them here. Meghan heard caution as surrender. He heard anger becoming another permanent decision. At Sandringham, Anne found a handwritten note from Charles waiting on her desk. The king thanked her for carrying a decision he had lacked the strength to announce himself. She folded the message without smiling. The gratitude did not lighten the burden. It confirmed that she alone would absorb the public anger. Anne then instructed staff to prepare gifts for Archie and Lilibet and enter their names in the private family gift register, the internal record of presents exchanged at Christmas. Meghan's access had been removed, but the children's blood connection had not. Late that evening, Harry called Anne alone. He did not demand Meghan's restoration. Instead, he asked whether any path remained that did not require his wife to surrender her dignity or the family to surrender its trust. For the first time, Harry stopped arguing about invitations and began speaking about repair, opening a narrow space where Anne's certainty and Meghan's pain could meet without the protection of public statements. The turning point came without advisors, cameras, or royal language. Harry called Anne not as a prince demanding access, but as a nephew, asking whether his family had reached the end of forgiveness. Anne answered not as the official who had removed Meghan, but as the aunt who remembered carrying him through grief decades earlier. For the first time, neither defended a public position. They spoke about what had been lost, and whether Christmas could mean anything if trust remained permanently impossible. Harry called after midnight in Britain, when the palace had fallen quiet, and formal voices had finally disappeared. Anne left her papers behind, moved into a smaller sitting room, and spoke with him alone. No aides listened, no advisors prepared replies. Without institutional protection, every word carried the weight of family rather than strategy. Harry admitted that demanding Meghan's immediate return would not repair the broken confidence beneath the decision. He no longer asked Anne to restore a place at Christmas. Instead, he asked what concrete act could prove that private conversations would remain private in the future. The question changed the call, because it acknowledged that the invitation was only the visible wound. Then Harry confessed what anger had been hiding. Every exclusion felt like another step toward losing his family entirely. He feared Archie and Lilibet would grow up believing their father had allowed pride to sever them from their heritage. Anne heard the fear beneath his voice and answered with sadness of her own. Removing Meghan, she said, had given her no satisfaction. Anne remembered the optimism surrounding the marriage and admitted she once believed Meghan's independence could strengthen the monarchy. Instead, mistrust had turned that promise into division, leaving everyone defending themselves while the family beneath them weakened. Anne still refused to reverse the Christmas decision. But she offered one narrow path: a private meeting after the holiday, without photographers, statements, ceremonial promises, or an immediate return. It would be a direct conversation about boundaries, responsibility, and whether trust could be rebuilt through conduct rather than declarations. After the call, Harry asked Meghan not to publish her statement. She first called that surrender. He told her silence for one night might be the first choice they made for their future instead of their anger. Meghan read the statement once more. Then she deleted the final paragraph attacking Anne personally and closed the laptop. For once, restraint felt less like weakness and more like control returning to them both. The Christmas invitation remained withdrawn, but Meghan's decision not to strike back changed the meaning of the conflict, leaving the public to judge a silence that was more complicated than defeat. By Christmas morning, the family dispute had escaped every palace wall. Broadcasters debated whether Anne had protected tradition or weaponized it. Supporters praised the decision as overdue accountability, while critics saw a calculated public humiliation. Yet one image captured the argument more powerfully than any headline: Anne walking toward St. Mary Magdalene Church, expression composed, while an empty space remained beside the family group, where Meghan's presence would once have transformed the entire procession. Television coverage turned the removal into a national test of belonging. Was royal membership permanent through marriage, or could conduct place it beyond reach? The argument widened quickly. Meghan and Anne became symbols in a larger conflict over loyalty, privacy, and whether the monarchy could survive endless public warfare without drawing a firm line. The palace offered only one sentence. The Christmas gathering reflected current private family arrangements. That phrase explained nothing, denied nothing, and gave Meghan no public sympathy. Its restraint intensified the spectacle, because every broadcaster filled the silence with judgment. For supporters, the silence signaled discipline. For critics, it concealed cruelty. For the family, it exposed how completely private trust had become public property. Meghan watched the live coverage from California, while Archie played nearby. When commentators began debating whether his mother still belonged, she lowered the volume. Her silence was not indifference. It was protection. She would not allow her children to hear strangers turn their family into a verdict. Anne faced a different wound. As she approached St. Mary Magdalene Church, the royal family's traditional Christmas place of worship, a woman in the crowd called, "What about the children?" Anne briefly turned toward the voice. Her composure held, but the question followed her into the service, because it struck at the one consequence she had tried to avoid. The next morning, a major newspaper printed Anne beside the empty space in the procession beneath the headline, "The Christmas line is drawn." The image became the defining symbol of the fracture. Yet the expected counterattack never came. Meghan issued no statement, gave no interview, and made no accusation. Commentators who had prepared for another public battle began treating her restraint as unexpected dignity. After the service, Anne sent Harry a photograph of the gifts prepared for Archie and Lilibet. Beneath it, she wrote only, "They were remembered." Harry showed Meghan the message without speaking. She read it twice, and the anger in the room gave way to something harder to name. The world saw exclusion, but the private message revealed something more difficult and more human. Meghan had been removed from Christmas, yet the family had not erased her children, and that distinction shaped the final verdict. In the end, Princess Anne did exactly what she had promised to do. She protected the royal family Christmas from becoming another arena of public conflict. Meghan remained outside Sandringham. The procession continued without her, and the boundary was not reversed. But the deeper verdict was not one of triumph or total rejection. Anne's decision exposed the cost of broken trust, while Meghan's unexpected silence prevented the punishment from becoming permanent warfare. Christmas closed one door, but it did not destroy every possible path back. Meghan did not attend the Sandringham gathering, join the church procession, sit at the family luncheon, or enter the official Christmas record. That record preserved participation in royal occasions. Her exclusion meant more than missing one meal. It established that royal access was no longer guaranteed by title, marriage, or history when trust failed. The monarchy chose controlled separation over performative unity. Charles accepted criticism because another staged reunion could cause damage. Anne enforced the boundary because crisis management had weakened relationships. Neither choice promised happiness. Both were meant to prevent Christmas from becoming another public contest. Meghan closed the news coverage after reading Anne's message about Archie and Lilibet. She told Harry she would not release her statement. She had not forgiven the humiliation, but she refused to let anger control what came next. Harry recognized the change and thanked Anne for remembering the children. Anne felt no victory. At the end of Christmas Day, she returned to the room where schedules had been prepared and found Meghan's place card face down beside the folder. She placed it inside the file rather than destroying it. The gesture preserved the truth without restoring the invitation. Meghan had been excluded, but not erased. The post-Christmas meeting remained available, though it promised no automatic return. Anne required sustained privacy, accountability, and conduct, rather than another appearance. Meghan understood that any path back had to be earned quietly. Harry understood that repair had begun because neither side turned private pain into public ammunition. Anne's action was harsh, public, and deeply painful, but it forced everyone to face the truth. Family connection could survive distance. Trust could not survive without boundaries. Meghan lost one royal Christmas. While the monarchy preserved tradition, Harry preserved a narrow bridge, and she preserved her dignity through restraint. No one won, but public destruction stopped. And as the Sandringham lights faded on a Christmas marked by absence, the final meaning became undeniable. Anne had removed Meghan from the gathering, but restraint on both sides prevented one painful exclusion from becoming the permanent end of a family. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.